get rolling, we'll start talking. Good. Thanks, Sam. So each week you have 4 things that have to be done, right? A discussion that is sometimes in several parts. There's interactive lectures and quizzes relevant to the lecture, or a quiz relevant to each lecture. And then there are a set of readings for every week and a quiz relevant to that reading. And then there is project preparation, right? So there are 2 projects in the course of the semester. One which is due for session 4, and we'll talk about that in depth today. That's a church visit research project. And then one that is due, I believe it is the, I'm sorry, I'll have to qualify this. I'm not sure if it's due on the 7th or the 8th session, but the final project is due at the end of the term. So let me just mention a few things about the discussion. Let's talk about the lectures and the quizzes first. Okay, so you should look at each week the rhythm of the week. So the way the course has been laid out by the creator is that you can go each week to the Learn section, and you'll find a link to the rhythm of the week. Sometimes it's actually found in the Apply section, but if you go to any week, you'll find a link to the rhythm of the week. It's actually a document that will show you not only all the assignments for each week, but the days on which you should have them completed. And that's good because there's quite a bit of work, and if you don't do it in proper sequence, you could get hung up. So for instance, you should read the lectures by Friday. Read is really a generalization. You're going to watch most of it. And take note of it, because you'll then have a quiz that you can take as soon as you've completed that. And but certainly you want to complete those quizzes by Sunday. This is all in the rhythm. I'm just telling you what it says. So read the lecture or watch it by Friday. Complete the quiz by Sunday. You have 2 opportunities to take the quiz. You can't take it more than twice, but you can take it once, find out what you didn't get right, go check that out, take it again, and improve your score, obviously. And again, the reason for that is that the quizzes are really designed not so much to test your knowledge as to tell you what you need to know. So you can take the quiz, find out what you don't know, learn that, and that will set you up for the exams that follow. And you can use all your resources while you're taking your quizzes. So you can have open books. You can go to those lectures. If you haven't taken notes, you can find. That's pretty awkward. That's pretty clumsy. Going back to a video is hard to do, but you can do that. You can use all the materials that you have available to take those quizzes. Let's talk a bit about the week 1 discussion post. Each week discussion is different. So they do follow a general pattern, but each week there are going to be different instructions. This too, the initial post should be made before the weekend, so that over the weekend you can respond to posts. Okay, so here's how this week is going to go. Your initial post is going to, and I'm just reading from the material that's available to you, you're going to describe your experiences in church. He calls it ecclesial experiences. So he's going to ask you to identify the heritage, that is the history of the church or churches in which you've participated in life up to this point. Now maybe that's a single kind of church that makes it easy, or maybe you've had several kinds of churches, you want to mention them all, but something about them. So for instance, are they churches that emerged at the time of the Reformation? Probably. You're in Protestant churches. Or are they more recent churches like the Assemblies of God, which is actually not a church that was formed until the 20th century. So it is not a church of the Reformation era. It's an offshoot somewhere down the line from those churches. So tell us a little bit about the history or heritage of that church and what you know about the mission of that church or churches. And then reflect on, again, the use of scripture, music, sacraments, ordinances, which is another word for sacraments, preaching and prayer. So he has a list there that he wants you to comment on all of those items. How's preaching involved? How is prayer involved? How is music involved? How do the ordinances come forth? And what is the role of scripture in that church? So your initial post should be 125 to 175 words. So what is that? A single spaced page, that would be about 2/3 of a page. Half to 2/3 of a page, okay? Single spaced. If you double space, it's a full page. So keep that in mind. That's the initial post. Then on the weekend, so if you do that by Friday, then over the weekend, you will want to interact with the posts of other people. So for the first week, what you're going to do is you're going to ask questions to 3 or 4 of your fellow classmates, whether they're right here on, in residence or face-to-face participants or the online participants. You're going to ask 3 or 4 of them specific questions about their experiences, so that you can understand basically what they've experienced. Ask them things that will help you understand their church experience. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. And then you're going to answer any questions that they've asked you. So this is all by the end of the weekend. So initial post before the weekend, over the weekend responses to them and to their responses to you. Okay? And then by Monday, you need to, as a separate assignment, reflect upon the postings of your colleagues. So reflect on what you've read from the other people who have posted. How do your experiences compare with theirs? And what you'd like to learn based on what you've heard them say, their own experience. How have their experiences prompted desires for you to gain greater understanding of what's going on in other churches? Okay? And that should be about 200 to 300 words. So again, if a single space page is 500 words, somewhere about, a little more than half a page. Okay? So how are we doing on that? That's discussion posts. Again, each week is a little different. I've described this week, these things are available for you. Any questions, however? Initial post before the weekend, responses both back and forth on the weekend. By Monday, a final post. So this is considerably more detailed than most of the discussion posts of other classes. This is more extensive.
So we post the initial post in the discussion forum, and we post the final post in the discussion forum as well.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And you do your interacting in that same, on the same platform. Yeah, it's more work, considerably more work but honestly, it'll be of a lot more, but I'm not certain that most of our discussion posts are worth much, to be honest with you. There are times when the initial posts, I think, are thoughtful, but a lot of the interaction is very superficial. This will guarantee that you have to interact a little bit more. It's work, but maybe more beneficial. Okay, so, and then we have another thing. We have the project. And that is, this first project is a church visit research presentation. Okay, so here's item number 1. You're going to go visit a church and examine the beliefs and practices of a church from the Reformation tradition. It gives a very specific list. That is Lutheran, Episcopal, Methodist, Presbyterian, Reformed, or Roman Catholic. So we're not talking about the churches that we are involved in ourselves now. We're talking about visiting churches unlike ours. And there's a reason. So essentially he's inviting us to take a look at churches whose roots are deeply embedded in the Reformation era and have remained there. Our roots are only derivative, very indirectly, of the Reformation, and they're much more recent. So we are not looking at non-denominational, Pentecostal, Assemblies of God. Those sorts of churches are very indirectly related back to the Reformation, most of them anyway. So you have to keep in mind, and it could be the Roman Catholic Church as well. So you have to keep that in mind. There are other churches nearby that would qualify, even though they're not in his list. The Anabaptist churches, that is to say, Mennonite, Brethren, Amish, even Quaker. Those churches do head back to the Reformation era or shortly thereafter, and there are quite a few of the Brethren Mennonite churches around. You could include them in this. They would be in the Anabaptist stream. Okay, so then once you visit, and I'm sorry, there's also one other. You could go to a church that is based in a different language. So you could go to an African-speaking church or to a Spanish-speaking church. Again, just to get you out of your normal comfort zone, look at another church, okay? And what you're going to ask to do is you're going to be asked to create ultimately a 10-minute, I'm going to say, it says 10 to 15, I'm going to say 10-minute presentation with a PowerPoint highlighting what you've learned. And there's a process for learning this. Basically, the dynamics of the experience, what you've seen there that you thought was important or interesting, okay? Now, the way it's described, it says we want you to create a PowerPoint with a voiceover. We're going to actually for those of you who are in class, we're actually going to do these presentations live. So you will have to create a PowerPoint, but you do not have to create a voiceover. If you are in the physical class, you can simply do it live. And if you'd prefer, however, to do a voiceover version, you're free to do that. We will watch it together and we'll discuss it, but you don't have to do the voiceover. You can present it live and advance the slides yourself if you prefer. So let's talk a bit about the specific requirements for this. Now you could, I don't know how you would do this. You can do this exercise as a group of 2 or 3. But here's the catch. According to everybody has to create an individual presentation. So the benefits perhaps of working with others is that you can share resources. You could share photographs, for instance. You could go to the same church and talk about it. You could, make it more of a group exercise if you would like. You do need to get my permission to do that. So you need to pitch that to me if that's what you'd like to do. It's something that you can do, but keep in mind that you still have to create your own individual presentation, even though you can share resources. They do have to be distinct and individual. So this week, what you're going to do is you're going to identify 2 churches that you may contact, right? So you're going to send an email to me and say, I'm considering contacting either of these churches. And I'll, whatever. If you have 2 churches in mind, I'll say, great. Unless I say, Jehovah's Witnesses don't count. So I probably will, or whatever. I would certainly say that. So this week, you have to identify the 2 churches. Next week, so module 2, what you're going to have to do is to present a 100 to 200 word action plan for your interviews and for your visit. Okay, so that's due week 2. So next week, what is due is just simply choosing those 2 churches to visit. Okay, so it's not a lot to do this week. You can start thinking about it. You're going to go out looking for churches that you could possibly visit, and you're going to pitch 2 churches to me. The week after that, you're going to describe what you're going to do there. My interview, what I hope to see, and you're going to contact a church. By that point, it'll be down to 1 church. You're going to contact that church. Now, you can have two on the list because one church may say, sorry, we can't do that. Because you're going to ask to interview the pastor or a pastor. And they may say, gee, I don't have time. That's why you have two options, okay? So that's in week 2, after next week. By week 4, or due week 4, you're going to submit your completed project. It's on week 5 that, and I will give you feedback, it's on week 5 that we're going to present them. Okay, so that it has to be completed by week 5. All right? So does that make sense so far? Okay? So when you go on your visit, you're going to interview a priest or pastor. You're going to visit the church and visit a worship service if you can. Obviously, we got coronavirus, so maybe you'll have to go to a church that has a video. I mean, if you can't visit, it's only if you can't visit that you shouldn't. But if you can't visit, then you'll maybe have to do the video version, which will limit you considerably, but it is an option. And you'll be looking for things like this. You want to notice the architecture of the church, how the people involve themselves in the worship of the church, what activities take place in the worship service. Do they sing? Do they read? Do they pray? How do they do these things? And you want to note what kind of visual representations of the faith do they use? Do they have icons? Do they have statues? Whatever. And then there's a list of interview questions here, which we'll talk about in the future. You don't have to do this right away, so we'll talk about that in the future. But there is a list of questions that you can consider using. Your presentation should be 10 minutes about. It needs to be at least 10 minutes. It can be as much as 15, but I doubt if you'll need that much time. Probably about 15, maybe 18 slides should be included. He suggests, and I think this is very wise, use plenty of pictures, because you don't really want heavy text. You want a PowerPoint presentation with only essential information supplemented with a picture as often as possible. You'll present bullet points, you're not going to put your whole speech on the PowerPoints, just the main ideas, right? And you'll present the full idea verbally. And there are there's at least one exemplary presentation that is viewable. It says, at the first place where it says, choose this link to view this, there is no link. You have to go down into the apply section of week 1 in order to get these instructions and find the link to the exemplary presentation, which will automatically download when you click on it. Okay, so any questions about this? These instructions are on the website, but I wanted to clarify a little bit at least. Okay, so one of the things that the professor who created this says, a lot of times students go, ugh, when they hear this. But in retrospect, a lot of students find this to be the most kind of interesting thing they do in the course of the thing. If they go to a church that's different from theirs, and they see how they worship, and they relate it to the things you're studying, particularly about the Reformation, it'll probably stick, and it'll be interesting. Okay?
How to do this and how to do that.
Yes, there's one of those later in the semester, but that's all. But this is the main research. Okay, we're good with the video.